Today on Carib Nation Television, Prime Minister PJ Patterson of Jamaica retires from public office at the end of March 2006, but not before he sat down with Carib Nation's Diaspora to reflect on his 3-term in office, his legacy, and his future. Plus, a visit to one of the Caribbean's most intriguing sites, a place once known as the richest and the wickedest city in the world. We're talking Port Royal, Jamaica. When America wants to know what's happening in the Caribbean diaspora, there is one clear choice.
Hello, welcome to Carib Nation.
Both people inside and outside are
very excited about today's program.
Looking at you, I can tell that you have traveled the journey.
One television organization brings America close to the people, stories, and events that affects Caribbean life. Get close, get answers, get Carib Nation. Percival James Patterson, an attorney by profession, has been Prime Minister of Jamaica since March of 1992. He was chosen by his People's National Party to succeed Michael Manley, who retired because of poor health. Mr. Manley, known as the champion of the developing world, espoused a brand of Caribbean socialism during his early years in office. Mr. Patterson's career in politics has shown views similarly diverse to those of Mr. Manley. Described as an architect of Mr. Manley's late economic policies, Mr. Patterson continued on the road of reform taken by Edward Seaga, who was Prime Minister in the 1980s. But Mr. Patterson also followed Mr. Manley with his criticism of the U.S. embargo against Cuba. When President Castro visited Jamaica in 1998, Mr. Patterson remarked, "We are opposed to the blockade of Cuba, which is morally wrong. No one is going to cause us to ignore that we are close neighbors." PJ Patterson was born in St. Andrew, Jamaica. His father was a farmer and his mother a teacher. He studied at home and overseas and was nominated to the Senate when he was 32. He joined the House of Representatives in 1970 and started a steady climb up the political ladder. He retired as Prime Minister of Jamaica in March of 2006.
It is uncharacteristic for a Prime Minister to demit office while in power. How did you come to that decision?
Well, it was not all that difficult a decision for me. When I was leading the party into the last elections, seeking our 4th consecutive political victory, I indicated that I would not be completing the term of office. And I therefore had to determine what was the most appropriate time to have the policies which were put to the electorate implemented, to have the programs to which we were committed ongoing, and then to leave the party to be able to choose my successor, to help install that successor, and to give that person enough time to complete the term and then to decide when within our parliamentary system they would seek a mandate of their own.
I see. So it was well planned.
Very well planned.
What would you consider your greatest achievements and your greatest disappointment while in office?
Internal and regional terms, I would say that I am extremely disappointed that we were not able to subscribe to the Caribbean Court of Justice as the final appellate jurisdiction for Jamaica and other countries in the Caribbean. Internally, we have had to wrestle with the problem of the maintenance of law and order in all sections of our island, and dealing with the consequences, particularly of drug trafficking through Jamaica and the wave of violence which has occurred in certain particular areas. In terms of successes, we've been able to advance the regional agenda. CARICOM is now the oldest integration movement of developing countries in the world. And we have been able to bring into being the Caribbean single market and are now working towards the creation of a single economy. It is essential that we do so because in a world of globalization, we've got to pool all our resources together. Within Jamaica, my greatest pleasure is the extent to which we have been able to transform the economy to build a competitive market economy. And we are now beginning to realize the fruits of it in terms of the levels of new investments and job creation that have been made possible. I'm also very pleased at the improvements in the social indices, in health, in education, in the provision of basic amenities, our roads, our water, our electricity supplies. We have decided that although greater access exists to our educational system, we need to transform the whole education system to ensure the requisite quality, the provision of the skills which are necessary in today's period of global technology. And I think we have started on that path. I think our progress is almost irreversible. And I'm very pleased that the person to succeed me is one who has been a part of the team for the last 16 years, a person who obviously will help to focus on some of the social issues which arise that will help to make us the kind of caring society that all Jamaica would want to be. We have achieved progress in a number of practical areas, but I think there's much work that still remains to be done. I regard politics and the development of a nation as a continuing stream of events, as a relay race, so to speak. And I thought the time had come to hand the baton on. We don't have mandatory term limits, but I came to the view that after 14 years, it's time for me to impose my own term limit.
You talked about the issue of crime and your inability to bring that under control. What would you have done differently looking back?
First of all, we have to recognize that the problem is not confined to Jamaica.
Sure.
And we have to treat it as a problem of international concern, while each nation, with the appropriate cooperation, will have to develop specific programs. I think we now have in place all the ingredients to deal more effectively with the problem, particularly of capital offenses. We have improved the technology. We have been more involved in community policing than ever before. We are getting increasing cooperation from the communities. We have targeted those who are involved in the leadership of the drug trade. Some have actually been apprehended. But it is a continuous,
Of course,
and
struggle.
ongoing effort. There can be no relenting. We are very grateful for the cooperation that we have gotten from other countries, particularly the British, the United States, and Canada. I recall several years ago at meetings of the Caribbean community, the question of security could be dealt with in a matter of minutes. It's now a major item on our regional agenda, because what we have found is not only that there's an interconnection, but very often when you put the pressure on in one place, the people move to another area, and therefore we've got to deal with it in a collective way.
Right. Talking about dealing with things in a collective way, there are a number of kinks still to be ironed out in the CSME, one of which is immigration. What advice would you give to the CSME architects to deal with immigration?
We've done a number of things in respect of immigration flows. I'll mention just a few of the most important. Firstly, we have agreed on certain categories where no work permit requirements are going to be necessary, and labor and skills are free to move around the community wherever they need an opportunity arise. Secondly, we are seeking to expand that area. We've started mostly with professionals, persons with tertiary degrees. We've included musicians, people in the field of sports, and of course, journalists. I think we have accepted that we now have to broaden it to artisans. With the level of construction and development taking place in different parts of the Caribbean, there's a need of skills and there has to be mobility. We also have agreed to implement a CARICOM passport, which, although it has to be issued by member countries, will bear a CARICOM stamp that will allow for easy identification. And many countries have already been issuing the CARICOM passports, and others will do so when their present stocks run out. And that should really make it possible to facilitate the movement across immigration borders. Incidentally, we have a need to put some of that in place next year, because we will be hosting the cricket, the international cricket, and there'll be 8 countries that will be hosting these matches, and there'll have to be the movement of teams and of spectators, including people from the Caribbean itself. So that the only advice I would really give is that we have to continue the process. We have to expedite it as much as possible. Of course, there are security considerations which cannot be ignored, and we cannot be oblivious of them.
Right, and that is, I suppose, a major task
Major concern
for the architects. You have been in power, as you said, for many years. You have been regarded and respected as a statesman in the Caribbean. The way you've handled yourself and handled the issues internationally. What would you say is your greatest strength that has led to your re-election time and time again?
Well, I think you have to have commitment. You have to have a vision which the people whose confidence you seek also share. You've got to be willing to listen and continually to learn. And then you've got to do some practical things. Improve housing, access to water, better roads, better education facilities, encourage people in the sports arena. You've got to manage the economy in a way that keeps inflation under control. And, as I remarked earlier, you're doing so in a rather different world than that which existed 14 years ago when I took office. We're faced with some major challenges in international trade arrangements, such as what has happened to our sugar and our bananas as a result of WTO rulings. Those have not only affected Jamaica, they have affected other countries in the Caribbean, particularly those in the Eastern Caribbean. And they have social consequences. So it's been quite a challenge. I think we have put Jamaica on the Caribbean on a sound footing where we can concentrate on those areas where we have a comparative advantage. We have all liberalized our economies. We're all putting an emphasis on educational opportunities. And I'm very confident of the future of the Caribbean, although there are hurdles that we will still have to overcome and challenges which will appear from time to time that we must overcome.
You touched on two things. The first thing you said was commitment, and you are optimistic about the Caribbean. There are still some doubts in the minds of some people as to whether the Caribbean is truly ready to battle in this global world. And there's some question about the commitment of some of our leaders towards putting it all out, so to speak.
Well, I put it this way. We had the vision, the leaders of the times and those of us who were ministers, to have fashioned the Treaty of Chaguaramas in 1973. At that time, it was a very attractive option. Now, it is a compelling need. In 1989, the leaders agreed in the Grandance Declaration to move the community to a higher level. The present leaders have done something about it, as is evident by the creation of the single market and the work we're doing towards the single economy. By how we have pooled all our skills and our talents in the several negotiating arena in which we are simultaneously engaged, whether in the WTO, whether with Europe, or whether within the hemisphere. And we may be small in population terms and not great in economic strength, but I think we have been working collectively to advance the interests not merely of individual member states, but of the region as a whole. And I've been very privileged to have had the responsibility for 12 of those 14 years of presiding over the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee dealing with external economic negotiations.
You were one of the first leaders to embrace the diaspora and utilize or harness that power. How do you see the rest of the Caribbean following that lead?
By coincidence, when we celebrated the 30th anniversary of CARICOM 2 years ago, I was asked as chairman to give a presentation as part of a lecture series on the Caribbean diaspora and its possible contribution to the whole process of integration and development. I think it has struck resonance with all member governments and within the diaspora itself. And perhaps the time has come when we who belong to the Caribbean diaspora must see ourselves as such and pool our efforts together rather than seeing ourselves purely as Guyanese, Jamaicans, Barbadians, Belizeans, and the like. It doesn't mean, of course, that we might not wish to make a particular contribution to our homeland, but we've got to look at the opportunities which exist throughout the region and decide how can members of the diaspora best contribute to the process of integration and economic development of our region.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I think that's for historians to determine. I would hope that history would regard me as one who presided over the affairs of Jamaica at a very difficult and unique period, as one who helped in the Caribbean to fashion a regional response that would enable us to survive and to compete, and that I have always maintained that the most important thing is developing a society where everyone is allowed to reach his or her potential. We in the Caribbean are gifted. We are creative people, and we cannot lose the value of that in the world of today.
I agree. How do you plan to spend your retirement?
Spend some more time with my grandchildren. I intend to do some writing and be able to carve out my own time, my own space for myself.
Excellent. Well, I wish you all the very best in your retirement and a nice, long, happy and healthy retirement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Nice speaking with you.
Next on Carib Nation, a stop at one of the Caribbean's treasured history site, Port Royal, and a look at plans to redevelop this sleeping town into a vibrant tourist attraction.
Port Royal. Rich in tradition and history, Port Royal is a testament to the multicultural community that built this amazing maritime center of world trade and commerce over 400 years ago. The character of this exotic place was molded by the lives of many diverse peoples. Native Tainos were overrun by the Spanish, who in turn were expelled by the English. The tombstone of Louis Galdi, a Frenchman, rests in the courtyard of St. Peter's Church. Thousands of Africans who survived the horrific Middle Passage found that their agonies in bondage had only just begun upon arrival in Port Royal, a major slave trade port. Here there was freedom for others. At a time of religious persecution in Europe, Port Royal exhibited a unique tolerance of many faiths. Quakers, Anglicans, Presbyterians, and Roman Catholics worshipped in their meeting houses and churches, as did the Jews in their synagogue. Today's quiet, unassuming fishing village of some 1,200 persons was heralded in the late 1600s as the richest and wickedest city in the world, headquarters to Sir Henry Morgan, whose plundering of Panama yielded 750,000 pieces of eight. He and other notorious pirates, Blackbeard and the infamous female buccaneers, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, all sailed under the ruthless pirate code. No prey, no pay. This hub of the English-speaking New World had a selection of goods which was said to be rivaled only by London. A 1682 account called Port Royal the treasury of the West Indies. Popular fashions of the day often originated on this tiny Caribbean peninsula, thanks to the riches of the slave trade and pirate gold. Human cargo, black ivory, was perhaps the most significant merchandise traded, as dealers from throughout the Western Hemisphere purchased slaves destined for cruel servitude in plantation fields. The center of life for Port Royal's rowdy inhabitants was its more than 30 taverns. A buccaneer historian writes of the wild brethren, "Such of these pirates are found who will spend 2,000 or 3,000 pieces of eight in one night, leaving themselves without a good shirt to wear in the morning." This decadence and debauchery reigned until the fateful day of June 7, 1692, when what many called divine justice struck. A devastating earthquake and 3 tidal waves took 2/3 of the town and its doomed souls to the bottom of the sea. The Frenchman, Louis Galby, was swallowed by the earth and then miraculously spat back to life in the sea. An estimated 2,000 persons were less fortunate, drowning, suffocating, or bleeding to death. Horrifically, others, partially buried, were eaten alive by the town's dogs. It is said that with a little imagination, you can hear the church bells sunken below the waves, tolling mournfully with the tide. The vision for the Port Royal Heritage Tourism Project is uniquely inspired to develop all that this special place offers into the most exciting eco-heritage tourism destination and cruise ship port of call in the Caribbean. To showcase to the world this exceptional location whose rich, authentic past is coupled with breathtaking natural beauty. Port Royal resurrected as living history with interactive recreation and entertainment for guests enhanced by the technologies of the new century. The Old World Trading Center, brought to life through period architecture, musicians, street performers, artisans and vendors, with cobblestone streets to stroll and shop for high-end reproductions of period items or quality handcraft and merchandise. The making of pewter and silver wares and leathercraft are some of the traditional skills that will be showcased, with completed items available for purchase. With the revitalization of this treasured site, visitors will be awed by its notoriety and intrigue, embraced in the warmth of its sunny Jamaican welcome.